let me go ahead and talk about backup of virtual environments, okay? And as I said, we have very, very good solutions here, but I'll at the beginning sort of talk generally and then go into our solutions a little more. So I'll talk in general about some of the backup, the techniques for backing up virtual environments, and then talk about specifically about the VMware vStorage API for data protection, okay? This is a second generation of API out of VMware. Very good API. Then I'll talk about our solutions. We have two major solutions for backing up virtual environments. One is TSM for VE, and then if you want to exploit hardware snapshotting, so if you have very large applications, you want to back them up very quickly, recover them very quickly, big data, you probably want to start thinking about hardware snapshot technology. As I mentioned, this is software snapshot technology, so a lot of the same benefits, but if you have hardware, good hardware, that you've already, paid for the copy services, you might as well, exploit that as well if you want, okay? So I'll go through those two, and then I'll talk about some of the recovery aspects, and then talk about futures. All right, why are we here? There's a lot of move towards virtual environments on the server side, okay? You can see some of these, quotes that and the densities are increasing too. Average, this is probably a little old, this is probably about a year old, but 1 to 10 was sort of the average a year or so ago. I think it's increasing, all right? And some have many on a single ESX server, single server. Okay, so a lot of people doing virtualization. Let's talk about what TSM offers and how are the different general approaches to protecting virtual environments. TSM supports pretty much any hypervisor situation out there, okay? So we support Hyper-V very well. We have very good support for VMware. We support ZVM, the KVM model, workload partitions, Solaris containers. There's different approaches in these, but TSM does as well as anyone else in all of these areas, and better than most competitors in a lot of these areas. You will have access to this presentation. There's a link in there with some information on what we do with other hypervisors. I'm not going to focus too much on that today. But let me go through, generally speaking, the different approaches that there is available for protecting virtual server environments. One is the in-guest support. And I think I have a chart on this after this. But basically, this is business as usual, right? You continue to put a backup client within each virtual machine. There's some pros and cons about that we'll talk about in a moment. Then host-based backup. What do I mean by that? I don't really have a pad up here, but you have your physical server, and then you have what's called a hypervisor. And the hypervisor basically pretends the physical server is many servers, okay? Virtual servers. New technology from VMware? No, IBM invented this probably about 50, 60 years ago. Remember our old, you guys are too young, our old VM virtual machine operating system and MVS, multiple, whatever it stood for. I used to be a system programmer back in the 80s for VM and MVS, and so all this VM stuff is new only in the distributed world. It's been around for 50, 60 years. But basically, the virtualization layer, or hypervisor, if you will, takes a stored physical resources and pretends they're multiple virtual resources. Okay, so the host base is basically saying, okay, I'm going to put a host right here on that hypervisor. Okay, it's not within each guest. It's at the hypervisor layer, but there's no special facilities for that agent to do something special in there. There's a little bit on Hyper-V, but not much. But so the host, what I mean by host base is you take a TSM agent and stick it on the hypervisor, on Hyper-V itself, on that operating system, okay? Or on the KVM or wherever. That's host-based approach. For most of the other, for all of the other hypervisors except VMware, these are the two approaches you basically have to take. And TSM works very well in both of those. And we do, as I said, as good as anyone does in these environments. Okay, and the rest of the discussion, most of the discussion today, I'm going to be talking about off-host backup and hardware-based snapshotting, and both of these are based around VMware. Okay, so we're going to focus on off-host proxy backups with TSM for virtual environment, and then hardware-based snapshotting with Flash Copy Manager. Okay, and both of those are only for VMware. Before we go, let's take one more look at the other two approaches, and then we'll spend the rest of the time on the VMware. One is the in-guest, business as usual, right? So you stick an agent on each of these virtual machines. Okay, that's fine. It works fine. Problem is you start getting a lot of contention here on the physical resources. There's no understanding in those agents that you're on a virtual machine. So you actually, those agents think they're on a physical machine. So there's nothing that you can do to change its mind that it's not on a physical machine, and that might have some weird implications. These tend to sprawl, right? Once you get virtual machines, it's like, oh, that was easy to create. You don't have to go out and order it. You just create it, right? And so all of a sudden, there's more and more and more and more and more of these. And that means more and more and more and more schedules and backups and operations and clients, did they finish, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times, that data is a lot of duplication, right? A lot of duplication. The whole operating, instead of one operating system, you have 10, 20, 30 operating systems, the exact same images. That sounds like a lot of wasted space and storage, right? Well, we resolve those kind of things with deduplication and other technologies. Okay, so there are some benefits. Let's not throw all stones. Let's throw a couple flowers at the in-guest approach. One is that there's some situations where you have to have an in-guest, especially on recovery, say with a database. Even if you take a consistent snap and protection of the virtual machine, you say, yeah, I feel pretty good because I got my VMware Snap, or I use Volume Shadow Services with Microsoft, and I got a consistent snapshot. That's good, but that's only crash consistent. The rest of the vendors haven't told you that it's only crash consistent, which means you can bring it back up, but you might not, your application might not be up to date. You can bring the application up, but it might not be up to date. Say for a database, you might have outstanding logs that with transactions that have to be rolled back in. That's the rest of the story. You need an agent in here to do that, or some kind of extra code. Well, you get that with the in-guest agent, and so that's very valuable. Now, in the futures, we're taking that capability, and we have the best in the industry in that application consistency with our TDPs, with the roll forward and all that. You know our Tivoli data protection products? We have it for Oracle, ERP, Exchange, SQL, all the major applications, email and database applications, we have very good synchronization with. Well, we're taking that technology from TSM and putting it into TSM for virtual environments and into TSM or into Flash Copy Manager. Okay, so we're spreading our technology to every place it needs to be within TSM. All right, so you'll see that come up on the futures. Okay, so that's the in-guest, and then the host base. This might be a little better picture than I tried to show in the air here. But you have virtual machines on a hypervisor or a physical machine, and that host, which is hosting these guests, that's where you stick the agent. So instead of an agent on each of these, you stick an agent here. That's pretty efficient, because if you can see all the storage for these guys and the girls out here, you can back them all up at once. So you can back them up through this one agent, so it's much more efficient than backing each one up individually. Problem is you don't have an idea. Looking at the storage here, you don't have any kind of idea unless you have an API that tells you how any part of that storage is related to any one or more than one of these agents or these guests, VMware images, all right? So this one's good, but it doesn't have all the understanding of the breakup of storage and how the storage is associated with each VMware. And so recovery tends to be, hey, let me bring all those disks back, individual volume recovery for this VM, or an individual file on this guy, or an email, a single email out of Exchange on this guy. You can't do it, right? You can't do it with this approach. Okay, makes sense, but should we throw stones at this guy? Yeah, but it's also okay too, because it's a lot easier to manage than the in-guest, and also, you use less resources, and also it's pretty much the only way available on most of the hypervisors. So Hyper-V, this is the best way to do it. One thing I should say, one word about installing agents on the VMware ESX host. Don't do it, okay? In an earlier version of VMware, they had something called VMware VCB, VMware Control Block, was it? No. And VMware Controlled Backup, I think that was it. Yes, VCB was the first version of their API. You actually could have the agent in the host, okay? So it actually ran there. On ESX, for vSphere, don't do it. They don't support that anymore, okay? So don't even think about it. Don't even think about it, okay? And I'll tell you what to think about for VMware. You could certainly do it in guest. You can't do it on host. This is the way you do it for all the other hypervisors. Okay, so how do you do it well for VMware? Let's tell you. Before we do that, I'll fly through a quick tutorial. How are we on time? Let me do a very quick tutorial on the VMware vStorage API for data protection. This is the new API. It replaced the VMware, what did we say it was? Controlled backup, I think, API. So this is their new API. Let me go through it real quick. It is the second generation of the API. Under the covers, it does some snapshotting through VMFS, the virtual machine file systems. It doesn't do backup. It's just an API. Any of you keep up to date on VMworld? They made a big announcement a couple weeks ago at VMworld where they've introduced a portion of their Avamar capability with this, but it's just beware. That's just it's like a 2 terabyte limit, and it has all the challenges of Avamar in a software version. But anyway, so they've started to extend it a little bit, but they're continuing with the full API support. Let's see, what are some of the other? I'll come back to this, but you can have basically you have a proxy, and that means you have a backup agent or backup entity that protects on behalf of the virtual machines that are on that. So it goes through this API, and the API represents a mapping of storage back to individual virtual machines through the API. And so it's a pretty sophisticated API. Gives you incremental, block level incremental changes. Okay, so only the changes when you go to do a VMware image for VMA, it's only the changes, the blocks that have changed to that VMA since the last time you ran, it backed him up. So it's incremental. You can also do differential, which means I do incrementals every day, but then on Saturday I want to come on and do all the changes since last Saturday or something. That's called differential. Incremental is since the last time. So it has quite a bit of flexibility. And then whoever writes to the API, like TSM, takes advantage of various capabilities within that. Okay, there's something under the covers called change block tracking, and that basically gives you the incremental only. So that's basically only give me the blocks again that have changed for each virtual machine. Okay, so you don't have to, occasionally you have to take full backups, but even that you can get around, and I'll talk about in a moment. Okay, I think I'll skip over this as sort of just details. It'll be there in the presentation you'll have access to, but this is what happens under the covers during a backup. So it's not just magic that happens. The API is actually taking some software snapshotting on the VMware side and then presenting the blocks and different stuff out to the API caller. I'll also skip over this. It's just a comparison of the APIs. Basically, VMware is much more sophisticated than Hyper-V and all the other hypervisors out there. Okay, IBM is actually working with Microsoft on improving the Hyper-V, and there's a lot of activity there. Also a lot of activity in Xen, and also a lot of activity in kernel, the kernel virtual machine, KVM, which is pretty common, the Linux one. Okay, so these other hypervisors will probably come along in time, but VMware is in pretty good shape now. Okay, let's talk about TSM for virtual environments. We use that API. We do block level incremental backups of individual virtual machines. So you can run these on the same schedule, separate schedules, whatever you want. In this case, we're showing a physical proxy server doing the backup. With the physical proxy server, you can go over SAN directly to TSM, so LAN free. If you have that support, you have that capability in your infrastructure and your licensing. Or otherwise, you can just go over LAN if the LAN free is not available. As you move through vMotion, or if you move around virtual machines or create new ones, TSM for virtual environments recognizes that and can automatically back those up. Okay, so it's not like, hey, someone over in the lab just created 20 new virtual machines and now they're complaining because they didn't get backed up and they lost some data. No, it's automatically backed up. Okay, the storage administrator, backup administrator doesn't have to worry about it. Okay, that proxy server, proxy means I'm going to act on behalf of all of these guys, each and all of these guys. Okay, so I'm going to back up, but I'm going to do it very efficiently here. Okay, and it can be a physical server. that physical server can also be a virtual server. So you can actually run the proxy within a virtual machine on the same ESX. You can have multiple proxies for very large ESX servers. There's I've seen some companies with 50 to 100 virtual machines on an ESX server. And in some cases with large amounts of data, they'll deploy multiple TSM proxy backups for different groups of VMs within that system. Okay? So it can be a virtual, we're calling this thing a vStorage backup server, so it can be on a physical machine or a virtual machine. And in the background, it takes advantage of all the capabilities of TSM, including deduplication. So you're deduplicating across from where your backup's being done into the server. Okay, so a lot of efficiencies here. It's block level, incremental, and it's deduped into the TSM server. So you're using basically client-side dedupe if you choose. And that's the same with the Flash Copy Manager that I'll show in a moment. Okay, so this is just details on the flow. So basically we go and ask the API for various steps. We interact with the API. We tell the API to create logical snapshots for those virtual machines. We read those logical snapshots, and depending on what we're backing up, on which schedule, we'll take different parts of that. It's only the changes, as I said. Then we go on to the next virtual machine. You can have multiple backups in parallel, multiple parallel backup streams. And we've made some improvements in that area in the coming release as well. Okay, okay, so incremental backups the same way. That was just a full backup. This is an incremental, it just takes the changed blocks as opposed to the full image. Let's see. Okay, one point here is that you can have both a proxy backup. So I have a proxy here backing up all of these virtual machines. Then you can also have an in-guest agent, and they can work together. Now you say, why in the world would I do that? A couple reasons. You could have, this one might do backup separately, maybe on a file system. You might want to just have file level access protection here. But you don't really need to, because you can take image backups and then present the file system out of here on recovery. So probably more of the reason is on recovery for the reasons that I talked about prior, which is for some applications, you may want the deep integration with the application that we have, like in our Tivoli data protectors. Now, come 2 months from now, in November, you won't have to do that even. So this will make less sense in a couple months. Why? Because we're taking the restore capabilities, the application synchronization, and we're delivering it with the basic TSM for VE. So you'll be able to do that roll forward and all that stuff I referred to from the proxy. Make sense? So, okay. All right, one comment I'll make. So you may have, typically you'll have a TSM server. This is a proxy backup server acting, if it's a small ESX, it'll probably do all the VMwares on that ESX server. As I said, you could have multiple clients, TSM clients here backing up different VMs on that system if there's a lot of them. But basically you have one or more VM or TSM clients acting on behalf of a set of virtual machines. Now, so you have that multiplied across all your other virtual or ESX servers. Now, if you have vMotion using, moving VMware images not just within the ESX but across ESX servers, something weird's going to happen if you're doing this, because you move it over here, a VMware image over here with vMotion, then this guy doesn't know about this backup that it did for that VMware. This looks like a new one. He starts a new backup, etc. You can avoid the inefficiencies. Why? Because he's going to have to do a full backup, right? Once he sees a new VM. And this guy will think it disappeared, so he'll start, data expiration or whatever as the time goes by. Well, you want to say, I'm going to move that guy, but I want to keep understanding about him. Well, you can do that with a special best practice. It's very easy. You just create a separate node, a data center node. You allow a linkage between each of the proxy backups and this one. It's very easy to do. It's a command that involves a proxy node parameter in TSM, and it's documented. And basically you say, okay, this guy can act on behalf of this guy. And so this guy knows about all these clients. He says, oh, this guy came over here, and he says, hey, I know that. And so now it understands that it moved between ESX servers, and it won't take full backups here. It'll just say, hey, that moved over there, and then you do recovery however you want. Okay, so just sort of a best practice to keep in mind. If you get to this point when in configuration, just go out and you'll be able to search and find information on this on the TSM website. We have a vSphere plugin, so basically if you're just using VMware vSphere for management, full management is available through here, okay? So you can go in, do your scheduling, do your backups, do your recoveries, everything from vSphere, okay? Here's another screenshot of that. Basically, you got your vCenter server here, and you drill down into, all the way down to the virtual machines. You do your backups, recoveries, et cetera. You can see what happened. All your management can be done from vSphere. Or this same client, pretty much the same interface, is available separately outside as a GUI. Okay, let me talk briefly about Flash Copy Manager for VMware. A lot of the same kind of processing, but with hardware snapshotting. The TSM for virtual environment, I said, is using that fastback software snapshotting capability. Again, this is very, very similar, but with hardware snapshotting. In fact, we had to do the same coding to the vSphere API with Flash Copy Manager in addition to TSM for virtual environments. Okay, so this actually writes to the vSphere API as well. Okay, and under the covers, it basically can leverage Flash Copy capabilities of the hardware. All right, so it coordinates with VMware, and then it takes snaps of the disks that the VMware images are on, or VM volumes are on. You can see how fast the snapshot is. Did you see that happen? Yeah? You want to go back? What? See a snap, it's like, well, pretty quick. A couple seconds in your snapshot. Technology, right? Okay, we have this for, you can do snapshotting on all the IBM's disk hardware with SAN volume controller and StoreWise. You can do it for other hardware as well. You can also do it with NetApp starting with our release coming out in a couple months. You can also do it on Windows. You can do through Volume Shadow services. You can do the same thing for other hardware as well. Okay? We did prove, as I mentioned briefly in the other thing, we proved that you can do 1,000 VM backups. We've tested 1,000 VM backups in 34 minutes, and this was one of a talk of discussion at VMworld, because I think this is pretty good compared to what other vendors are able to do. Okay, let's talk about recovery. I think we're still on target here. Yep. Okay, what kind of recoveries can you do? First of all, you can do a full virtual machine recovery from TSM. This is TSM for virtual environment. I won't go through all the steps because we're a little short on time, but basically it's a full VMware image recovery. Okay, you can do that for TSM. All right. You can also do the same thing with the hardware snaps. You can do a full virtual machine recovery, and this goes through some of the underlying details of what's actually happening. You're copying back from your local snap. In the case of virtual environment, you're recovering back from the TSM server. Okay, so you're coming back and restoring back from the TSM server. With the hardware snaps, you're recovering from the local snap that you snap to, you snap back. Okay, very quick. And again, for large, if you have some critical large applications, with big data, lots of amounts of data, and you really need to back those up quickly and recover them quickly, you really are going to, at some point, have to think about hardware snapshots. I have companies all over the world talk to me, I got this big data application. What's big data? It depends, but some people call it 10 terabytes, but typically when big data, you're talking 50, 100 terabyte, 500 terabytes or more, and you need to back that whole thing up daily, or sometimes more than that, and you need to recover it quickly because it's a key application. Well, how do you do that? TSM, got my backup going, it's going to run for a day. Or like, well, no. At some point, when you're talking about that kind of situation, you're going to have to move to hardware snapshots, okay? So just keep that in mind. Software snapshots get you a long ways there, too, compared to like a traditional file level backup. But at some point, you're probably going to have to move to hardware snaps for those big data and recovery requirements. Okay, so virtual machine, full machine recovery from hardware snaps. Okay, you can do the same thing with Flash Copy Manager. All right, and again, you can have it come from here, the local snap. If Flash Copy Manager, you also had it back up from the snap to TSM somewhere, you can bring it all the way back from TSM as well. That's all managed very easily through that vSphere interface. So there's a vSphere plugin for Flash Copy Manager as well as TSM. It looks very, very similar. Okay, so full virtual machine recovery. You can also do a volume level recovery from both TSM or Flash Copy Manager. Now, the volume level recovery is very, very interesting because during the restore, we have something called instant volume recovery. During the restores, the applications and OSs will act and look like they are in full production mode. So if you have a large database here with very large volumes, many terabyte volumes, okay, it may take a long time to recover one or more of those volumes. Say you have 2 or 3 volumes underneath a large Exchange database. It may take a long time to recover those volumes. You don't want your application offline. What you can do here is it'll recover the metadata for each of those volumes that you do as part of this recovery. So you have that volume, you recover the metadata, and basically in a few seconds, it'll present up to the operating system that volume is fully recovered, even though it hasn't moved a block back from TSM yet. You've formatted it like it's recovered, and then in the background, you're bringing across the data and recovering it. Now, you bring your application up right away. The application, if it's reading a block that's already been recovered, it just reads it. If it's writing a block, it just writes it. If it reads a block, the funny situation is if it reads a block that hasn't been recovered, it'll go and our code will queue that up to the top of the thing, and that'll be the first block recovered. So it's really a pretty powerful tool. It'll allow you to bring back your application in a matter of seconds. And oh, by the way, the first blocks to be recovered will be those being accessed, the most recent activity on that application. Okay, so all of those things will be coming back as fast as possible. All those hours of stuff that, hey, those blocks won't even be accessed. Well, you don't care. Your application's up, and it can run for however long it needs to run to bring it back. Make sense? So that's what we call instant volume recovery. We don't have instant recovery for the full virtual machine yet. We will come with that in the next version, in the next release coming out by the end of the year. Okay, today you can have it for the volume level. Very, very powerful. We don't do the active operating system for instant recovery. You have to recover that full one. When we do have the virtual machine, it'll bring back everything, and you'll be able to start operating immediately. Okay, same sort of thing with hardware snaps for a virtual disk recovery. Okay, there's some differences under the covers, but functionally it's the same. It brings back a volume, but it's coming from a snapshot. Now, you can also do file level recovery from that same snapshot. So what happens is, this is a beautiful thing we got from our FilesX, our TSM Fastback technology, the software snapshot. Within the TSM database, it looks like snapshots of each of these volumes. Every time you took a virtual backup, just an incremental backup of one of these virtual machine volumes, back here that volume looks like it's a full volume at that point in time. You may run one every half hour or every 10 minutes or something. And it'll show us different volumes fully available in the TSM database. Now, of course, between linkages and stuff, they share blocks and stuff. It's very efficient, but they look like you can mount those full volumes. And under the covers, we do a iSCSI mount, either from here or on the virtual machine itself. So you can back up by the proxy and then go to the virtual machine to recover. Or you could come over here. You may have lost your whole site. You can come over here and say, hey, I want to mount this guy and start recovering my virtual machines on this new ESX server I have over here. Very, very powerful. And it's all, again, it's very quick. And so you basically, in a few seconds, you mount up. It thinks that whole thing's recovered, or that whole volume's recovered, and really it's still in the TSM database, and you can just go file level recovery. You can bring up Exchange database and do email recovery. So you can do, it's very, very powerful. Very nice. All right, and same sort of thing, you can do file level recovery from the hardware snaps. Again, we basically mount that thing up, and then at that point you can run your applications against it. If it's a file system, you can drag and drop files or whatever. Okay, some of the futures here. We do have this block incremental forever coming in the next month or two. There's only 1 or 2 other vendors, I think, that have this. So this will be pretty unique for us. I think the vendor that does have it is a pretty small vendor. But basically this is, right now, we had to do some additional coding to do block level incremental forever. So we do block level incremental, but we still need an occasional full VMware image backup. We'll do away with that full image backup requirement in the release coming out in the end of the year, in the next couple months, okay? So it'll be block level incremental forever. You know already TSM does incremental forever already, you know, with file level incremental with the basic client, and then block level incremental with fastback client. So this is really what it should be, incremental forever, and we'll get that put there for virtual machine environments in the next release coming out in a month or two. Okay, and then the instant restore, I mentioned the instant restore, not just of the volume, we'll also be able to do it at the total virtual machine level. So this is one other area we just had to do some more coding to do it, and we couldn't get to it in the last release, so we'll be finishing that up. Tighter integration, I referred to this a couple times, so we're bringing the code from our TDPs, Tivoli Data Protectors for, what is it, databases and mail and whatever, ERP, when we're bringing those into here, okay? Into our TSM for virtual environments. And, okay, that's incident restore from Snapshot of the full virtual machine. And then the Flash Copy Manager, I think I actually showed this in the last presentation, but we're adding the ability to take the copies to TSM from Flash Copy off a global or metro mirror. So you can actually have this across a city or across a region, and then take the TSM backups for disaster recovery across that. So it gives you a lot more flexibility on how you use Flash Copy Manager. In fact, this may let you use this copy as a disaster recovery copy because you're across a city or metro, or you're across a geography. And then we're bringing the, oh, gee, got carried away. Then we're bringing the NetApp support, native NetApp support. Okay, and then there's quite a number of enhancements. I talked about some of these briefly for virtual environments in the first session, but a lot more and better reporting for virtual machine and VMware environments. Backup stats and new metrics coming back from each virtual machine. We weren't catching that. Also information that was just stuck in the activity log, we're reporting on better. We're allowing multiple backups processes in parallel, so this should improve efficiency. There's something called VM templates. You might not be aware of them, but basically they're configuration templates for your virtual machines. Previously, we didn't back those up. Now you'll be able to back those up as well. There's a new configuration wizard to help you through this. So just making things easier to use in terms of protecting your VM environment.